we talk. See, we got to start thinking, why are we making decisions and following somebody's lead based off your own insecurity or pain? In this case, I'm tired of dealing with it. Well, you led her here.
Right. That's right. Yeah, and it's unfortunately this is something we hear and see constantly. People are thinking that they're making decisions out of frustration. They think they're making the right decision because they're just tired of something. And that's the thing that we really want to help people understand is that leadership is not about being in charge, being the boss, or making a decision. Leadership is about making the true decision, showing up as we talked about this morning with integrity. That means being true to who
Mhm.
you are and doing what is right and not making an excuse like I'm just done. I've tried everything. I'm free from this now. Just going to live my life. But what happens is those non-decisions that you made, those poor decisions that you made that led you here, that you just want to get rid of, are just going to follow you into the next relationship. They're going to follow you into the next job. They're going to follow you into every realm of life.
That's correct. And this goes further, right? When we talk about integrity for a second, people think integrity is telling the truth. And while that's a part of it, it's the follow through and therefore the taking responsibility when we have enabled. I'll give you another part of this guy's story. She's starting to have a drug problem. She's coping with drugs. Well, he's providing it for her, right?
Uh,
And he says something like, "But babe, it's a Thursday night, you know, like
mm,
what you're saying when you make a decision out of integrity is it's okay. We can do this. Maybe we should do it on Saturday
yeah.
instead of today, right?" And it goes deeper. He's not leading her at all. That's the only time he'll be able to have what he calls intimacy, sex, which we know is not intimacy, right? Is only when she's high.
Uh,
Well, and I'm like, well, dude, this is numbing. This is, by the way, bleed number 6, or 5. I mean, right now we're into bleed 5. You see how these things all stack. So now he's trying to work more to make more money to support a stupid habit. It's numbing her. She can't even feel it down there when he is having sex. So he's promoting the job sex, checking off the to-do list, get it
yeah.
over with. And now he's taking all of this to work and calling me in the middle of the day.
Uh,
You see the problem with this?
right. So now he's looking for somebody else to fix his poor choices. Yeah.
Correct.
And then he's trying to get validation, trying to get excuses, trying to make excuses for why things aren't working the way he is. Yeah, I mean, it's an epidemic. And I think, if we think about the world out there that says, hey, you know what, if you just learn to make better choices, well, you can go and learn what good choices are. We can give you a list of 1,000 good quality choices in every space of life and just, charge you $1 million for them and you'll have all the answers, but you still won't be true. You still won't actually know how to employ them, how to pick them. And so a lot of people, I think when they think about making choices, they think about what's best for how they feel or what would so and so do. Let me just copy them. And we end up with an entire lifestyle of mimicry. And that mimicry, that means when you mimic or you pantomime somebody else, you just take and copy paste somebody else's life's decisions. So I'm going to do this and then I'll get X. But the thing is that, if I'm 6'1" and somebody else is, 5'3", we're not going to be able to have the same choices in clothing. We're not going to be able to have the same choices and what kind of sports we participate in or what type of things that we do. A 6'8" guy can't ride a horse as a jockey. Those guys are typically very small. And the point I'm making is if we don't learn to make decisions on our own, it's going to just continually perpetuate a false narrative, even when it produces good results, but they're not true results and they're not lasting results. And eventually we're going to say, well, this doesn't match the persona that I've created for myself. So I'm just going to change now. I'm going to make another decision that matches it. And it's just, I don't even know where to go from here, to be honest with you, because it's so prevalent that it's frustrating when somebody says, well, hey, I won't help. Now we say what? Okay, do this, think about this, reflect on this, follow this path, and you'll get the answers you're looking for. And then turn right around and not want to do it. And then call us back and say, hey, can you help me make the right decision here? What should I do? What should I do?
Well, that's the point, right? Like we think about leading. So we got a man who's thinking about giving up today.
Yeah.
Okay. Filling out divorce paperwork. Okay. We think about leading, but are we leading? I can't take this anymore.
No.
Right. By the way, second marriage. So whether or not you walk away or not, like this is not looking good for the next anyway. Because go back to us talking about emotional regulation the other day. This is exactly the problem. We're not emotionally intelligent. So we decide and we think we're doing it like making the right choice, right? She's just so nasty. I'm no longer yelling. I just can't take it. But he says something right in the mix of it all. He says, "This breaks my heart." Well, there's your answer when you're making a fucking choice. You know, a lot of us, we base decisions not off of leadership, off of following somebody who makes us feel something. By the way, nobody can make you feel anything. It's just what we say. Okay. Now, who cares if your partner says that, by the way, you make me feel, doesn't matter. We're feeling whatever. Latch onto that. Okay. But now we can start to address all these other bleeds that are happening and make decisions based off of, well, you're hemorrhaging right now. People are struggling because you're hemorrhaging in your relationship. Basically, because you're struggling because you're hemorrhaging with your own identity.
Right. That's right.
Right.
Yeah, I teach this emphatically, and it sounds sort of like a hook, if you will, but I teach people that when they find their autonomous self, when they start to live in congruence with the inside and the outside, in other words, the outside life matches the person that they truly are inside. They didn't decide to be this person. They didn't say, well, I like this identity or these values, I'm going to put them on. They recognized that they were always there, and they realized the things that weren't in congruence with that were just patterns of performance. And when you find that congruence, when you get to the place where the person you are in the deepest part of your being is the person that's living out all the decisions, you get to the point, this is where the hook comes in, I don't ever have to make a decision. I never really have to make a decision. Now, of course, that's not true, but in a lot of sense it is, because the decision is made by who I am. The decision is made, and what I need to do, even hard decisions, are made because of the person that I am. And so we're never making decisions based on outside influence or validation or frustration or emotion. We're making decisions because they match who we are. And even if they may not be the best decisions, they're the right decisions in the moment. And because if we see that, we need to revamp, we need to reestablish a different path, we make decision X, and we're walking down the road a few days, we go, that wasn't the best decision. We just make the better decision. And then we go back and we take responsibility for not making the best decision 3 days before. It's not like, I can't do that. Now, that's another thing. It compounds. People make bad choices because they don't have an identity. That choice in and of itself is their identity. And if that was bad, then they're bad. And it's just this ridiculous cycle that goes over and over and over and over again in this thing.
You know, I posted last night, and it's going viral right now. And it's the classic hook. Don't have to fuck someone to cheat.
Right.
It's the new song that I put out. And this is such a really good example. We think about wanting more with our love life. We don't feel loved, right? We don't feel like we're having enough sex. And so we start looking for our identity somewhere else and making decisions to support any and every way we can to build ourselves up. Right. And so this case, I'm talking about men, talking to other women, elevating another man's wife with their eyes, talking to women on DMs, Instagram, all these kinds of things, making decisions, saying, this is the same man, by the way, is going to complain that he's disrespected. Making decisions to support the very life that you don't want. And here's the problem. So now, a woman wants to send this song to him instead of just playing it around him. Right. And she's making a decision to correct him instead of connect with him.
Right.
I realize you don't want to have sex with him right now. That's why we're here. Right. But the point is that we start making decisions thinking we're leading in the right direction, and we're not. And then we start to hit the other bleeds, the disconnect with your kids.
Right.
Right. Yeah. The grief you feel for yourself when you don't feel loved or respected. Right. And this starts to affect you everywhere you go. At work, where you spend most of your time, with your family. I mean, what did the guy say? The client last hour, he said, "I walk in the house with a gut-wrenching feel."
Yes.
Of fear.
Yeah. Yep.
Fear.
Yeah. We talked about that last week in one of our podcasts, and somebody said, "Well, what is fear? I don't know that I actually live by fear." And you can ask, you can answer, you can ask the right questions. Do I fear anything? But you can find out if you fear. And we actually conclude that most decisions and most actions in people's lives have some sense of fear behind it. And if the fear of fear is fueling your decisions and fueling your actions and fueling your motion, your momentum, what is that going to produce? But a catastrophe, a absolute chaos in every space of your life. And then we go from home to job to community to family, and everywhere we leave a trail of tears and a trail of fire and a trail of trouble, and we don't know why. And so we think we just got to circle back around and make better decisions. Well, it's not about becoming better. It's not about it's about making the right decisions. And in order to do that, you have to be the right person. Who's showing up in this context? And we see this, and we, especially in the management level or the leadership level at work, we see it all the time. And then what do jobs do? They say, "Oh, I know what. We'll create this. We'll get this workshop going. How to make better decisions, how to find purpose, how to do this, how to do that, and the other." And everybody's using the buzzwords, but ultimately they're not following people who have taken the path that they're saying they want to take them on. That'd be like me wanting to have a tour guide of a cave that I went into a couple of weeks ago. I went into the bowels of the earth for 3 hours, and the guy who was leading this group of 10 knew that cave so well. He just said, "Okay, over here, we'll turn here." And you'll see, look up on the ceiling back there. You'll see this little sketch mark up there. I mean, this man knew it versus somebody like me who'd never been in the dirt. You don't want me leading you there. But yet, even if we have the right words, sometimes we follow because we're desperate. But what we need to be, instead of desperate, we need to be deliberate with intention of saying, I'm going to first make a choice that I'm going to discover who I am so that I can walk in a manner worthy of the life that I'm supposed to live. And then I can lead people, because you can't lead people to where you're not going.
And this is women too. I was inviting a man, so he didn't join the program. He was about to. And his wife is angry because he's had an affair for 8 months. Well, not for 8 months.
Right.
It's not the first time. His wife is pissed. Now, in her emotions, she's justifying why it's over. And I understand why people leave when there's affairs. No. But hear the words out of her mouth, because I'm not going to show my children what it's like to sit there and be walked on by a husband who doesn't love. Oh, but you're going to show them how to quit? By the way, she's the leader. She's a breadwinner. She's quite high up in her company, right? And I don't know how to explain this to you other than the human bleed. That woman making choices, talking about God, all the justifications in the world, not even following the words that are coming out of her own mouth because she's hurting so bad. Now she goes to run work, and with this divorce, she's going to have to share custody. There's going to be different problems with the calendar, different bleed. She says she got her shit together. I know that's not possible. I just heard this woman scream. You know what I mean?
Right.
What did you say to me this morning when we were having our call, James? You said, I know that somebody doesn't know who they are when they lose their mind like that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, yeah. And yes. And I even said to you, and you said, well, that might be a bit extreme. I said, and I have done this before in the past, but if I ever just lose my mess and just cuss somebody out, I probably wouldn't do this work for 6 months. And you said, well, that's a little excessive. But and here's the differentiation. It's one thing to be able to say to you, man, you've really upset me and I'm tired, you turd. At the same time, and then walk in congruence with who I am by being honest, versus losing my mind and making a scene. That's the difference. The person who loses their mind, the person who texts threats, the person who goes on a tirade and rants and rants and rants about their employees, the person who constantly has everything negative, that person is not free. That person is not real. They are living a performed life, and they are so bound up in that they don't know what to do from day to day. These people can't even make proper decisions. Now, there is a sense in which some people think that they do. It's sort of like me. They play the role of they play the roles and the responsibilities, the masks. They're perfectionists. They're the producer. They're high functioning, but yet there's always an emptiness. There's always, if somebody doesn't see what I do, then who am I at the end of the day? And that's probably one of the worst types of situations to be in, because you just don't know that it's there until you see it in a very hard place. And that's what makes it so frustrating. So yeah, a person who loses control is not a free person. A person who becomes dysregulated and then manages it and then takes responsibility can be a free person. But you know what I'm talking about. Most people spiral and stay there. They never go back and face the music. They never go back and make make any attempt of repair. They just accept it as it is, sweep it under the rug, or just continue to move along.
Oh, 100%. I mean, I'll give you an example with this woman here again. Like, she had a laundry list of complaints about him. Now, I know that those complaints are valid. Fuck, it was almost verbatim what I teach in my program.
Right.
You know, but you know what I know from her level of anger and not knowing herself and seeing that either my husband loves me and does this right, does what I say or not. What I know is that she belittles him. She treats him like absolute garbage. And so she doesn't know herself. And that's what Dawn says here. If you don't love yourself, how can you love someone else? We specifically have to teach that. Most people, I think, don't know how to receive love. That's why their expectations are too high. That's why they feel shitty about themselves, and therefore they can't lead themselves, never mind someone else.
Right.
Because they're not real.
Right.
Right?
They're not.
They're not real. We were talking this morning about somebody who used to work for us, and he's gone onto social media since leaving us, or since we let him go, talking about his particular skill set and acting like a coach. And that was, I think, 2 weeks ago we saw that. And then we all saw in the last week, he's changed to a relationship coach. And I know for a fact that's one of the reasons we had to let him go. He's not a product of the product. Right. He was lying. He was masking. Right. You know, he wanted to be a part of what we had so that he could try to create love in his own home. And the whole, like I work closely, just like you do with our team, the whole time I worked with him was always about himself not feeling good enough, not loving himself enough.
Right.
He could not lead to where he wanted because in his pain, not feeling like he was getting enough love, he was ignoring all of her bids for connection in front of me. I'd text him. I'd be like, dude, you're on your phone. Get off your phone. She just did this. She just did this. She just did this. Right?
Yeah. And
it's crazy.
Yeah. It's, you know, and this brings us to a whole different conversation in the context of leadership. But I think we'll just call it an avatar. The avatar fits in a lot of spaces. The avatar stands in a lot of rooms, and the avatar is the person who is in desperate need of help, who has made poor decisions because they don't know who they are. They've walked a performative life for decades, and then everything's falling apart. So they finally try everything. It's like the Mrs. Doubtfire dinner scene. You know, you hear me talk about this a lot, where Daniel is, you know, he's Mrs. Doubtfire because he's the nanny that seeing his kids that the court says he can't see, and he falls in love with his kids. They fall in love with Mrs. Doubtfire, but then they find out it's dad, and then anyway, long story short, he ends up at the wrong table with the prosthetics and the lipstick on, and everything goes to pot. Everything goes crazy. That's what happens. Here's the avatar. Everything goes crazy. So everything's exposed. Everybody knows that you're a quote fraud, and then you have to pick up the pieces, and then they find help. They get the help they need, but the performance still continues because instead of actually saying, oh, you know what, I don't know, let me learn, let me grow, let me stay here and look in the mirror and spend time in this deep reflection. Let me spend time in this, you know, space between who am I and who am I living to be. They just decide, oh, I got it. I got the next script. So they write the next script, they take the next role, and they look like the person that they're following, but they're not going where they're going. And then one thing happens where something's going to blow up. Something's going to burn down, and it's typically the relationship at work, typically the relationship at home. And in that sense, then what will take place is they'll blame the process or they'll blame the people who were part of their growth. But the problem is they made a decision to copy and to perform rather than to be humble and to be honest. So they lied to themselves. So then they go out and say, well, now I know this information. Let me go out now and be the expert in this information, because as long as I'm teaching this information, I sort of feel like I'm in it. Well, if you're not in it when you're not public, then you're not true.
Agreed. And, you know, I think it's important to understand when we talk about leadership, it's not necessarily masculine, feminine. It's not necessarily man, woman. It's not necessarily supervisor, top down. Okay. It's important to understand that when we lie to ourselves, we don't make proper decisions. In other words, I wouldn't say I lead you, James, and you wouldn't say you lead me.
Yeah.
We walk together. We lean on each other for our strengths. Catherine and I are the same in our marriage, but she'll say that I lead her, and I'll say I'm her leader. But in reality, we each have strengths because we can make decisions based off of what we're both good at, because we're both authentic. We can say, I don't know.
Yes.
Let me think about that.
Yes.
Right?
That's right.
And the problem is we think of authority. We see this all the time with the corporations, right? No, you're not a leader at work. They have to listen to you.
Yeah.
You're the supervisor.
Yeah.
That's not a leader.
That's
So when
right.
you make decisions, that's why we spend so much time going within companies going, no, but what are the real problems?
Right.
Like that guy that we had to let go. Okay, it was marriage problems.
Ah,
It wasn't a skill set. We were training him wrong. That's how we started to figure this stuff out.
right.
Right? We're attacking the wrong issues. Now then it's up to him to want to do more.
That's right.
We address the right issues, not the symptoms.
That's right.
Right?
Yeah, we talk about this a good bit. The you know, what are you going to do with it? You know, it's one thing to make a choice. It's one thing to say to come to a conclusion, but it's another thing to make a decision. Because the conclusion is, you know what, I need to do this. A decision is I'm going to do this, but that's not a decision until you act on it. I want to be healthy. I'm going to be healthy. I've decided I'm going to be healthy. You don't change your food. You don't change your movement. You don't change your attitude. You don't work on yourself. You're not healthy. So a lot of people just enjoy the constant talking about what they want to be, what they're going to be, and how they're going to do it, rather than actually just being quiet and showing. It's like my writing coach told me in May of 23, show me, stop telling me. Just show me in your writing. Well, how about show me in your life?
It's like those guys who are leaders. Oh, I'm so busy. And then they give you like a 5-minute spiel on everything they've got going on.
Yes. Yeah.
Man, busy people are too busy to talk about shit.
Yes. Too busy to
like,
talk.
Unless you're carving out time, have a conversation. But even then, if you're a leader and you were deciding to connect with someone instead of correct them or explain or justify, which is what this type of person would be doing, right? Even then, we're literally we're making a decision to disconnect. It's all about me.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
That's right.
And so, like Don's talking about, communication is key. I beg to differ. Conversation is key, and conversation is curiosity. It's patience. It's understanding, wanting to empathize. It's ping, 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 exciting because we have the foundation. So now we don't care. We're on the edge of our seats. Everybody's ready to listen. Nobody cares who's interrupting who.
Yes.
This is a conscious choice of a leader who's made a decision, not a person who's tired of fighting and being defensive and yelling. You know, I'm not going to yell anymore. That's not making a decision. You can't follow through on that shit.
Right.
You have to make a decision to say, I want to connect more.
Yes.
I'll use the affair example again. Yeah, we all know the rules of marriage. What do you think you do with guilt and shame trying to correct your partner? What? What if you made a decision to take responsibility about how the fuck did the affair start happening in the first place?
Yeah.
Nobody's cheating on someone amazing unless they're characterologically cheaters.
Right.
Which is not really most.
No.
Let's get real.
Really most. It's very rare, to be honest. It's very rare.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, goodness. And what does it look like when decisions hit that? I mean, how can we help people understand the context of making choices out of truth without getting into about a 4-hour lecture right now?
I think you said it best earlier when you talked about you don't have to make decisions because you know who you are.
Right.
So we just go back to that example with the man at the store or at the restaurant with his wife yelling, right? I know who I am. So if something were to trigger Catherine or somebody else in the restaurant got triggered, I know what to say to that person in who I am and how I breathe life.
Right.
Right?
That's right.
So I'm not going to walk away like this man did. What? And fuel her fire?
Right.
I also know what we can do as a leader to proactively go out to dinner next time.
Yes.
It might look like something like, let's say it's the last 3 times we went out to dinner, which I think is what he said. It might have been 6. Can't remember now. But so he's got a healthy fear of what's going to happen. All right. Well, if I want to make a decision as a leader, I'm going to invite for a good time based off the response. Or if I need to actually be prepared, because it's the last 6 times, I'm going to say, all right, if you start to get escalated again, I'm going to remind you I'm on your team, David, okay? But if it doesn't go that way, I'm going to leave, okay?
Yeah.
I'll just let you get an Uber. You might, if it's that bad, she's yelling in front of 100 people, you might have to grow a pair and lead her to a better decision in her own mind. But what did he do? He starts talking about the 100 people in the fucking room. Listen, you shouldn't give a shit, like I said earlier, about the other 100 people. You should give a shit about the person you love. But when you're hurting, you want to protect yourself.
Right. That's
You
right.
can't make a decision. So how do you do that? Core values. One of mine is to serve and protect. It's actually love like a wolf, which is serve and protect, which is that means my wife comes first.
Yes.
My mate, in other words. And my litter, my kids, next.
Yeah.
Then the people around me, my family, and so on and so forth. So if I know that, I don't make a decision to give up. So who are you? First, with core values.
Right.
Right?
That's right. Yeah, and when we talk about core values, it's we get to the same place, but we teach it a little bit differently in the sense that when I talk about a core value, I actually say that a core value and a core identity are the exact same thing. And so when I get to the end of everything, we discover that if I am love, the expression of that, I am love, therefore I love. You see the difference there? So if I am humble, if I am humility, therefore I act in this way. So if we say we value something, we say it's important to us, integrity or protection or family, then it's always going to have an action behind it. Otherwise, it's just talk. Otherwise, it's just noise. And when we start to codify, or if we start to write these things down in our minds even, and really start to parse them out and say, okay, this is what it looks like for me to be a human being, the trueness of who I am. When I am my truest when I act from these core values. Therefore, those core values are your identity. Are they yours or are they borrowed from someone else? Now, it doesn't mean that you don't share them, but have you taken the time to say this is truly? Because I know one of the things that I'll show people my list of values, you show people your list of values, and a lot of people will just adopt them without ever doing the work, which is what we're getting at here, without ever doing the work to test them, and most importantly, without ever doing the work to embody them, to say, okay, I live this way. Because there's a difference in acting and being integratable. So you can't say I'm love, but I'm never going to love. You can't say I love my family, but you treat them like trash, ignore them, avoid them, abuse them.
That's because you're adopting.
You're adopting.
You're adopting. Yeah.
Yep. And
like when people say respect, I hate it when people put respect on a value list. Something should just be fucking normal.
Right.
Normal isn't going to change your life, by the way. You know?
No.
So people put respect, but they don't want to honor the fact that they've been disrespectful. And I don't mean honor in a good way. I mean take responsibility for the fact.
That's right.
Right? Somebody asked, what kind of roles feel like right to you in a relationship? I think that the roles are, we go deep on the podcast on this, but the roles are defined by what you decide together.
Right.
But I'll tell you, it most of the time, the most solid belief system that I could try to instill in somebody when it comes to roles at home in a relationship is that you have to act as though you would with or without your partner.
Right.
You know, like fuck if they leave you, you still have to be kind. You still have to be a great parent. You still have to clean up your own house. So I think it's a much different topic. We can talk about that another time. But then somebody asked, what does it mean? Nobody's cheating on somebody amazing. Nobody's cheating. Nobody's divorcing. Nobody's screaming at an amazing person. Meaning, it doesn't mean that you're not going under some level of hurt, pain, abuse, neglect, whatever. Okay. My point is, you did something to enable it. You've been somebody that's not great. They don't see you as the same person they ever did, unless it's characterological, meaning it's from the beginning.
Right. Yeah,
it's just
it's
who
the
they
serial
are. They did this in
cheater,
other
they're just
relationships.
unfaithful people. And at the same time, we're not saying that they're off the hook. They're still responsible for the infidelity. It's still something that has
Correct.
consequences, and it's still a bad thing. Okay, it's a poor character trait. We're just saying that don't be surprised when it happens, because as our little spiral or tailspin of betrayal, 40 something, 42, 47 things that take place in the process of this before the end of the relationship, before the physical affair, so we all have responsibility. But herein lies the problem with like leadership. What we want to look at the other person, say, well, the other person's doing this and I'm depressed, and the other person's saying this and it makes me feel bad, and the other person's acting this way, and if I could just get them to act that way, then I'd feel good. We're passing the buck, putting external situations as the core reality of how the internal me is going to change. So I can only
Mhm.
be happy if. Well, it doesn't mean that. So here, let's put it this way. It's the best day of my life, but I could also have a kidney stone. It's the best day of my life, but I could also lose a child. It's the best day of my life, but I could also break my foot. All those things, you know what I'm saying? So how can you say that? Well, what does my joy have to do with my experiences? What does my person, who I really am on the inside, have to do with someone else's opinion of me? Love for me, approach for me, anything. As long as who I am and my internal structure and joy is dependent upon someone else's influence or attention, then I am never going to be free. I'm always going to be modeling subconsciously my life around what makes me feel good, perfect, loved, and accepted in the life of someone else. And the way we know we've done that is when we start to we're willing to change who we are and what we believe and what we stand for to get or to garner the appreciation of someone else. And this happens, this is not just in marriage relationships. This is in every relationship. It starts as children, and it is really big into the business world. It very big into the corporate world. We see it all the time. And productivity and all of this stuff just gets praised. And so we just go, oh, in our subconscious mind, wow, I did a good job, got a good boy at work. I feel like somebody. And that's not okay. You are somebody and you did a good job, and you're still worthy, and you still are somebody when you do a bad job, because here's the beautiful thing about perfection. Perfection includes the failures. To be perfect means you're perfectly true. And to be perfectly true means you're always you. Well, you're going to have failures. You're going to have bad days. You're going to have rough times. You're going to have hard situations. You're going to deal with difficult, I don't even believe there's difficult people, but you're going to think you're dealing with difficult people.
Mhm.
That's just the way it is until you stand in a place of knowing that who you are is immovable in the face of
Mhm.
anything, period.
I spoke with Pete. Pete's one of our mentors, been with me for I think 3.5 years now.
Yeah.
Um, and spoke with Pete. His mom just passed away. It was very sudden. Um, Alzheimer's. I just learned this. You can't tell about the kidney stones because they forget the pain, and they don't know how to communicate. Nobody understands what's going on. So
Right.
he loses his mom, and dad's probably pretty much any day now. And you know what? He thanked me. He said, because of the work that we've done here, um, it's still the best day of my life. This is a man who
Oh,
loves his parents so much. They're both parents were living with him at the end here,
yes.
right? Yeah, dad still is with us.
Yes.
You know, best day of my life
Yes.
because he knows who he is. He said people are asking him with the chaos of what's going on because it's very fast, with his parents, and they're just saying like, how are you still so happy?
Yeah.
And he said, death is a part of life. It's not because he's just accepting it's a part of life.
Right.
It's because he doesn't have to get lost in the grief. So we talk
Yes.
about grief affecting people minimum, usually 1.5 to 3 years, and like upwards of 7 in a lot of cases.
Yes.
We see this affecting, this is destroying marriages, grief and loss, destroying marriages.
Yes.
We see it affecting people not being able to work. Oh my gosh. And this isn't going to happen to Pete. It's not
No.
going to happen to Pete.
It's not. No, he's a phenomenal person. And, this is just an example. And you mentioned some of the bleeds there. I mean, caregiving and parenting is one of the bleeds. And what we mean by that is it compounds in the sense of our business life and our corporate world and our home life. And it has a fixed a fixed cost. And when it comes to identity and it comes to knowing who you are in your life, if you don't know yourself, if you really don't know yourself, there's a fixed cost. And that fixed cost is yourself, is your relationship with you. And like one of the persons that just said in your comments, Cass, that you got to love yourself first. That is true. But you also got to know what love means. That's one of the first 3 questions that I ask my one-on-one clients. They have to write a little tiny paragraph. I tell them to write a few sentences, but they end up coming back with about a page and a half of who they are if no one needed anything from them and how they define love, the first 2 questions. Because in the work that I've done over the last few years, I've seen that those 2 things tie together so well. And then depending on how we answer those 2 questions, how we see ourselves and how we understand how we're loved and how we're supposed to love others, will carry every ounce of us into the world that we live in. Every relationship. We just did our 16 weeks to connection. Week 11 last week, it was parenting, connecting with your kids. And then there's a way to connect with kids and there's a way to manage kids. And a lot of times we manage our lives the same way. Just be quiet, just do what you're told, just get the behavior, just do like this. And we wonder why those kids either behave out of fear or they misbehave out of rebellion. Either way, it's not real. There's no connection there. It happens every single day, and then it goes into the workplace, it goes into our faith, it goes into our life. But a guy like Pete, who is also a dear friend of mine and a brother in this work, he's not going to be shaken. But if you were to ask him, are you grieving? He'd be like, absolutely. I have immense pain. Was this hard? One of the hardest things I've ever had to deal with. But it's still the best day of my life. You see, and you can't fake that. You can't just say that and then walk. Why? Because if it's the best day of your life, then you get up and you continue to do what needs to be done while you carry the grief, while you carry the pain. Because the pain has purpose. The grief develops you and helps you grow. It's not the point. It doesn't define you. It just happens to you. But who you are never changes. And that's a beautiful picture.
It is. I mean, if you think about it, anybody watching or listening, when you've lost somebody, you mentioned child when you were talking about stuff in your best day of your life. I could lose a child would be the best day of my life. Whenever you've lost somebody, we make it about us. It's about how bad you feel.
Yes.
And we're not saying sweep this. Like you said, I talked to Pete too. He is hurting. He is in immense pain. But the burden that you put on somebody because you don't know who you are, i.e. a piece of you is taken if you lose somebody, that's not true. That was somebody in your life. It's not taken a part of you away. But that's, in other words, what we do is we treat our spouse that way.
Yeah.
Right?
That's
Well,
right.
I'm going through this. A job loss would be the same sort of grief that we see.
Right.
Right? It's not the fact that you're making less money. It's the fact that you're being like a poor leader with yourself. Go get another fucking job. Start a business. You know what I mean? Do something. Keep moving. I mean, you saw what happened with social media algorithm changing
Yes.
in January. I mean, we literally went to like people don't even know who we are. And so I have to get creative.
Right.
Just start posting differently, posting a little bit more specifically. I have to start writing songs. Like I could have grieved.
Yes.
Or I could lead by making decisions that are calculated. Well, like, and this is a big deal. This significantly changed the budget for the company, for the family, for everything.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
We can deal with grief because we know who we are. I'm not a hard worker, like somebody might say. I am. But I'm a man who is not going to stop on a mission.
Yes.
And know what I'm obligated to do. And so you can do whatever you want with your fucking algorithm, but I'm going to find a way to beat it.
Yeah.
And it didn't affect us. We just built a very expensive pool. It's not done yet, but like Catherine and I didn't go through struggles with our relationship.
Right.
When everybody else would be like, holy fuck.
That's right.
You know what I mean?
That's right.
Start freaking out, panicking. You're not leading.
Yeah.
You're following your fear, your emotions, your grief, your sadness. You're coping with things like your alcohol, substance abuse, or whatever.
Yep.
You know, and then you try to put on this mask of it's all fine. I'm fine.
Yeah, I'm fine. And then when you do start to try to figure out why you feel so defeated, you blame other people's other circumstances. You blame the grief.
Especially your spouse.
And then you blame your spouse. It's amazing to me the number of specifically men in the last 2 years, Cass, that have blamed their spouse for things that they did not even do. They're so bent on finding a way out of being responsible that if she had never done this to me, then I wouldn't have been this way. I'm like, what
the fuck does that? Come on.
Yeah. I'm like,
come on.
That's a whole nother podcast episode there, brother. But I mean, we'd have to use the beep feature, beep, 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 because we wouldn't get on YouTube. They'd take our money away. But, but it's, it's the biggest bunch of nonsense. And, and then if it's not that, it's something else. A lot of people just avoid. They just don't want to deal with it. They act like it's not there. They rewrite in their own mind why they're the way they are. And then they said, "That's just the way I am. It's just the way I am." That's a good tell that you don't know yourself. When you say, "That's just the way I am." And you're talking about something that somebody would judge as not so good.
Mm-hmm. She just loved me for who I am. That's the way I am.
Yeah.
Several ways
Yeah.
we hear it. We should do that tomorrow. Let's do an episode of showing how the bleeds affect you taking responsibility.
Oh yeah.
That's
Beautiful.
good.
Yeah.
That's good. We'll do that tomorrow. But see, when you are trying to move your life forward, it's going to be easier to blame. And so we make decisions that perpetuate the life that we don't want.
Right.
Right. You brought up getting healthy earlier. Right. See, most people, they get healthy for the wrong reason. This is why you start and then you stop. Right. Like something I like to teach people back when I owned the gym would be, okay, so why is it that when you're unhealthy, you don't say, I'm going to have a healthy cheat meal? But when you're eating healthy, you're like, I deserve a cheat meal. Or when we have people that are working all week long, downloading. I can see my podcast gets the Moral Marriage podcast getting downloaded. And then I can see on Friday, Saturday, Sunday, when you don't do the downloads.
Yeah.
Like it's always less than half the downloads on the weekend where you have more time. Now I know some of you drive to and from work. That's not all of it. Right. So what we see is we're taking I deserve a break.
Right.
What we're doing. Right. And what happens there is we're making decisions that don't support our life. Let's use a simple example with your kids. Right. We talk about punishment. We don't use consequences. Here in Texas, they're big on spankings. What in the world? I'm not saying your kids should never be spanked, but in Canada, where I come from, you can't. You be charged for assault.
Yeah.
For spanking your kids. But like, what in the world? Or spanking is not necessarily going to teach them anything. Why would it? You're going to teach them to be afraid of you, to want to lie to you.
Yes.
Right? Because we're making decisions, creating a cycle we don't want. What do I mean by that? Well, we want our children to do great, don't we?
Yeah.
And you can see how this affects everything. We just let our kids stay up as late as they want, pretty much. Right? Get up in the morning when they wake up, just like us. Why? Because we want to teach them life of entrepreneurs, not life of
right.
9 to 5. I want them to make money. You know what I'm saying?
And what's crazy about that is that when they learn who they are and they grow up, they'll understand responsibility, and then they'll adjust their day-to-day as needed based on who they are and what they need to accomplish, not on what somebody else told them when they were 6 that they should be.
100%. Yeah, Catherine, you talk about responsibility. We talk about this when we coach parents to be better parents. We'll say, yeah, but you can teach them responsibility, but you can also teach them teamwork and still be watching what a leader looks like. Because like Catherine was running around with the kids cleaning up the farm yesterday.
That's right.
Not just go pick up the trash, food bags and whatever. You know what I mean? So there's just so many different ways we can think about this. Leadership, it's important to understand why we make decisions and what we're trying to create. Like, in other words, now we're using all these kid examples. We can see what kind of people, little humans, do we want them to turn into when they're big humans.
Mm.
That's choices that we make.
Right.
Right?
Yep. Everything rises and falls with that. Everything does. And you even couple that almost everything rises and falls with emotion too. So if we're making emotional decisions, we're creating emotional havoc. We're creating emotional shock waves into the world that we live in, and we wonder why everybody is adapting. Most of the people that think that they're well regulated and well rounded and grounded aren't. And most people, they learned that they found the way to act that way. But when the push comes to shove, they start thinking, well, how many people say, well, I have emotional intelligence. Well, you have knowledge of emotional intelligence. It doesn't mean that you have emotional intelligence. People say, well, I'm grounded. Well, you know about how to be grounded, but you're not grounded. You are able to perform groundedness. It's different. And the way you know is, are you triggered? Is a trigger more than just when I see a Cybertruck, I go, ugh. I say it out loud. Ugh, they're so ugly. I just see those things. That's not really a trigger, but that's about as deep as it needs to be. Or does something cause you to really just have to respond and hold back? That's not something that's expressed from an authentic self. That's a performed response. When you have to hold yourself back, that's something in that space, whatever it is a performed response. And recognizing that, don't sit there and say that you're a regulated person just because you can calm down. The regulated person doesn't get dysregulated, even though in some sense you might find the occasion, you might feel it, but it's so quick to actually be resolved, you don't even notice it in the end. It's a big deal. And I know it seems nuanced, but it's, a lot of folks listening, they might say, well, I just don't even know what we're talking about here. But what we're talking about here is that the decisions that you make from day to day are a reflection on how you see who you truly are. And if you don't know who you truly are, those decisions, while well serving you now, will eventually fall apart in the end.
It will, because it goes so much more beyond your values, for example.
Yes.
Right? It goes so much more beyond your emotional intelligence. It goes so much more beyond, because there's always other layers that you must understand. I'll give you an example. We know that if we want to know where we're going, we need to understand goals.
Yes.
Right? And so most people can't create goals because they're also dependent on somebody else to make that goal happen.
Yes.
Instead of this is why people ask us every day, how do you get disciplined? How do you get motivated? How do you follow through? I get probably asked that 5 times a day. How do I learn to follow through? You have to understand where you're going. There's so many different levels to reaching the outcome, the desired life that you want, but it all starts for who you want. You're responsible for your choices. So we'll talk about that tomorrow. And somebody's asking about, or telling, he didn't cheat on his wife because she wasn't amazing. And he goes on, I want you to call into us on Wednesday night with Catherine and me. Okay? 1-888-96. Because we'll go deeper on that. This isn't the show for that, but everybody gets the things that people want to talk about, this stuff that we're trying to say with this sort of topic with affairs, for example. It all overlaps with 7 human bleeds. Okay, they stack together and it affects every area of your life. So we have to go so much deeper, and I'd love it if you call in. But in the meantime, guys, this is the Human Bleed. Appreciate you watching.